On April 9th, 2011, I was drinking beer with a friend in Bruges, Belgium. It was a brewery that we'd wanted to go to for a few weeks after we'd gotten back from flying missions supporting Operation Odyssey Dawn. It was a time to relax and a time to reflect. I was talking to my friend, drinking some Belgian beer, which was really good. And my phone rang, and out of my almost dazed, just serenity of enjoying the moment, I heard my mom's voice on the other side of the phone. And my mom said to me, "It's Reese. He's been hit, and they don't know if he's going to survive." Time and place, I was flying F-15E squadron out of RAF Lakenheath in England. My brother was serving as an EOD technician in Afghanistan. It was 2011. Reflecting back on that time, I didn't know much about what I would call balance with work, with my personal life. I wasn't married, my brother was. I immediately started thinking of my mom, and I started thinking of his wife and his kids, and how life in a moment is disrupted by a phone call and disrupted by a war that seems so far away. And I had just returned from Libya, trying to forget the notions of the war that I had just returned from. What I didn't know until much later was that what informed my mom on that phone call was news directly from the site where he was hit. Two pararescuemen who arrived on scene gave an initial report that my brother was a quadruple amputee with no vitals. That was the first call that I got. Moments later, it would seem moments, more probably like hours later, was that there was a follow-on report that claimed he was a triple amputee with vitals. After a long pause on the phone with my mom, I caught myself staring off in the distance. The balance of the moment disrupted. A moment in time where my thoughts were completely disconnected with my family and with my reality. It was a moment that seemed to last for an eternity. Without thinking, I jumped into my car. I had driven down from England to Belgium, got on the Autobahn and drove as fast as I could to Germany to be with my brother's family, who was stationed out of Ramstein, and also because I knew that most injuries from Afghanistan come through the hospital at Landstuhl there near Ramstein. That night, I arrived at my sister-in-law's home. I was immediately beset with rumor control, trying to figure out what was going on. Social media had reared its head. My brother's wife was on all Facebook outlets trying to find some semblance of truth. And really what she was finding was more frustration and turmoil spilling over into the living room where the kids were watching TV. She was trying to hide it, trying to control herself, and I was trying to control the situation. It was a moment in life that I will never forget. So I ended up calling the hospital at Bagram. I'm pretty sure I broke a million rules, but I knew, having flown missions, that the operations center for my squadron would have the phone number to the hospital. So I called, and I ended up finding a nurse in the operating room. A nurse answered the phone and immediately handed it to the doctor. The doctor sounded hesitant and suspicious of my voice, and I said, "My name is Captain Hines. Reese Hines is my brother." And he knew the name, and he said, "I don't know if I can talk right now. I'm kind of in the middle of something. Can I call you back?" I said, "Sir," I pleaded with him, "I'm in Germany with Reese's wife and his kids. I just found out that he got hit. Can you please tell me what the hell's going on? I need to know." The voice took a deep breath. There was a muffled passing of the phone, and then the nurse that I originally spoke with began speaking. She said, "We're in the middle of surgery," and then calmly explained every injury that my brother had. I was relieved. I immediately hugged Reese's wife and his boys. A day later, Reese finally arrived from Bagram into Landstuhl there at the Ramstein airport. I convinced the casualty assistance personnel to let me on the tarmac to be out there on the Bluebird bus when the KC-135 pulls up. As I think about that moment, I can smell the jet fuel. I can hear the sounds of the engines winding down. I can feel the presence of the individuals to my left and right who were offering me support. I had my earphones in and I couldn't hear their voices, but I could tell what they were trying to do. I could internalize it. I see the first stretcher come out and it's my brother. They lower him down to the ground and I walk up and there's a team of doctors and nurses that are huddled around inspecting every inch of his body. And all I could see is his face and his head. It's about 3 to 4 times the normal size that I would expect. I couldn't really tell by looking at him that it was my brother, but I knew it was him. As they loaded the stretcher onto the bus, I followed. And I leaned over to the doctor and I said, I don't know what to do, just tell me what to do. And the doc said, he's your brother. Just talk to him. So I did. I told Reese that I was there, and then he was going to make it. Reese was in a drug-induced coma, but I swear when I started talking to him, he turned his head to me, to my voice. And at that moment, when the strain of the previous week, the few days, had overcome me and I broke down as I'm almost doing now, I had to get off the bus. The doctor came after me and said, you need to get back in there and be strong for him. I put my hands to my head and I cried so uncontrollably that I shook. But I was able to pull myself together and I went back onto the bus and I rode with my brother to the hospital. A few days that Reese spent in Landstuhl were turbulent. Reese would flatline several times and he would be revived. His will to live never faltered, nor did the effort of the staff and the individuals who were there to support him and myself and my family. I remember the team of doctors and nurses and technicians pouring their collective hearts and souls into Reese and the other patients that were there. Eventually, they stabilized Reese enough to be on a aeromedical evacuation flight across the Atlantic to Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. The flight was cold. The stretchers of injured personnel were stacked in the large cavern of the C-17 with another team of nurses and doctors equal in their effort to ensure that they were comfortable along with their family members. My mother asked for a blanket for Reese. The anesthesiologist looked at her and said, he doesn't know if it's hot or cold, and my mom said it doesn't matter. She placed a blanket over him, careful not to disturb the network of probes, leads, and IV tubes that were monitoring his health and keeping him alive. The day Reese arrived in Washington, it was a warm spring day, filled with budding flowers, the cherry trees in the front entrance of Walter Reed. Reese was transported there via ambulance. The entryway was guarded and gated. It seemed such a small measure of separation, the physical appearance majestic and ordinary at the same time. I remember the beauty of the cherry trees and the pristine condition of the landscaping. It was immaculate and warming. I immediately felt this balancing of serenity and chaos that hit me at the same time. It was a point of clarity for me. My wife, who was part Hopi and part Kiowa American Indian, arrived later that day. She's always been a source of strength for me, powerful in her wisdom and her guidance, sage, and always seemed to be able to cut through the chaos to find the center of my balance to reorient me to the now of the moment. Later, I would recall an American Indian saying that she and her family would speak at gatherings. Happily, may the roads back home be on the trail of pollen. Happily, may they all get back. In beauty I walk. With beauty before me, I walk. With beauty behind me, I walk. with beauty below me and above me, with beauty all around me I walk. It is finished in beauty. It is finished in beauty. I think about that saying, how it impacted me in that moment and how it still impacts me. That moment was my precipice. It was a point of clarity that sharpened and forged in the trials of battle, and the sudden realization of the loss and the indignant trial of war for those who have lost. I was amongst my tribe there in the hospital, a tribe of brothers and sisters. The landscaping set amongst a backdrop of beckoned urge to restore balance, as if it was a communal area for tribes to come and to gather and to share in their sorrows and find comfort in their mutual grief and support and hope for the future. Since 2011, there's been a constant theme in my personal and professional life of how do I restore balance in my family tribe? How do I restore balance in my military tribe, who I consider my brothers and sisters? So I began my quest to internalize and conceptualize this balance, and inevitably to grapple with the forces that continue to disrupt that balance. If you visualize a seesaw on a playground with kids playing around it, the seesaw sits on a fulcrum, usually never in balance, but always offset to one side with some greater force that compels it down or compels it up. In the middle of the playground, around the seesaw, are the kids and the parents, with a careful, watchful eye to ensure that their kids will remain safe. One side of that seesaw are the less than 0.5% of American society that serves in the military. Think about that for a moment. Less than 0.5%. The other side of the seesaw, across the fulcrum, is the 99.5% of American society that constitutes those who have never served. If one tries to imagine how that seesaw would settle, inevitably it would be the 99.5% forcing greater weight, compelling that seesaw almost if to the center of the earth. But in reality, the seesaw is rested in favor of the less than 0.5% of the military members who have served, because of the amount of weight, the burden on those who have served offsets the percentage to where it is such a force that drives it. In either case, military hospitals such as Walter Reed, amongst the many playgrounds built for the families that live there when the wounded warriors are going through their transition and receiving care, those wounded warriors are both warriors who have received wounded, invisible wounds, and they're all sent there to recover. That hallowed ground is not only a hospital for those wounded warriors, but it's also a community of support and healing. From the entryway to the immaculate landscape to the parks and beds of flowers, Walter Reed was, for a while, simply home. For me, the wounded warriors, the families, the staff, and perhaps most importantly, the civilians who would come on to the base to do cookouts and to do concerts, and who would just be there to offer their support, to walk around with families, to help plant flowers, to watch over the kids on the seesaw. They were bridging what seemed to me to be an eternal gap between that flight from Germany, from the battlefield to Washington, D.C., with a mixture of civilians and military, and then the medical staff would come together like a wave crashing on the shore to come to some rest of balance between finding a sense of normalcy and healing, not just for the wounded individual, but for their family. The sense of family in disabled veteran intrigued me, and it still does, something I call tribe because of my wife's American Indian background. David Gerber, author, wrote on the subject of disabled veterans in his book, Disabled Veterans in History. And he says, the physiological damage to those fighting wars have constituted society's most difficult problem. From the perspective of rehabilitation, pensions, and social reintegration, all of the injuries sustained in armed conflicts, the disabilities are a singular and abiding and perhaps increasingly problematic feature, not just for the wounded warrior or their family, but for American life and society at large. Think about that for a moment and reflect back on the 17 years of continuous war that we've been in. It's been a constant engagement, a constant pull of balance, and that's been an inexorable challenge for us as soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines, contractors, civilians who have been in theater, to find that balance. So what's the linkage? How does my story impact you in your quest to find balance? To this question I offer, we must all seek balance, not only within ourselves, our tribes, but as a society. The implications are many, and the solutions are challenging. Many politicians, political scientists, military leaders, and scholars alike have addressed this. Some call it wounded warriors, other invisible wounds of war. Most commonly, it is characterized and often exacerbated by what is referred to as the civilian-military gap. So how do we find balance, and how do we bridge that gap? I offer that we support a culture of healing versus enabling the condition. This means identifying with the individual, not for who they are or who they've become as a wounded warrior, but who they've always been, who they truly are inside. In that effort, you can ground yourself in a shared meaning of both service and sacrifice. Those are two common traits that are universal. If you have served, if you are in a tribe or a family that has served, or if you have no common associations with service members and their families, everyone can identify with service and sacrifice. Reach out in your community. Honor not only yourselves, but honor your friends and your families. There are many other ways to support and contribute. Walk to a memorial, contribute to a cause, find unity and common sense of purpose within your communities. How I personally found balance. Think back about that seesaw that was on the playground at Walter Reed, and about that image of the population and how that was divided. One kid who was 7 at the time was clearly heavier and bigger than the other child. Yet the force that would compel them from the ground as they used their legs as leverage to push was this continuous ebb and flow of balance. And in that moment, with my mother sitting next to me, did I realize that my personal mission to find balance within my tribe, as well as in the community there at Walter Reed and in their tribe, gave me not only a sense of purpose of not just serving in the military, but serving those who are in the military, and serving those who are not in the military, because then maybe I can find some commonality of purpose between the two, and I would challenge you to do the same.